Hello, I'm Jim Lovell. It has been my pleasure to introduce the history of America's achievements in space. The Eastern Press has used official films taken by the astronauts and NASA to bring into your living room the most thrilling and significant events in our conquest of space.
We have commit. We have liftoff.
The earlier volumes presented the highlights of space flights in a manner designed to maximize the excitement and educational value of these vicarious journeys. In this volume, you will step back from the moment-by-moment action to obtain a broader perspective. You will hear astronauts, engineers, and journalists who were involved in the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs reflect on man's reach for the moon. You will see each mission as an extension of the one before and a preparation for the next. You will realize that missions that did not set records or involved extraordinary risks are as important a part of space history as those that did. In contrast to the secret operations of the Soviet flights, the United States invited the world to witness its failures as well as its triumphs. The deaths of the 3 astronauts in a fire in 1967 and the loss of a Mercury spacecraft on the second manned flight were as open to press coverage as the first American spaceflight and the first lunar landing. Part of the broader perspective is a comparison with other events in the 1960s. The war in Vietnam divided people. 3 leaders were assassinated. Turmoil and strife churned the nation. Seeing courageous men overcome tremendous difficulties and open new frontiers provided a refreshing boost to the country's morale. The public obtained a new perspective of Earth as they saw it from a lifeless moon. On Earth, we realized how lucky we are to live on a beautiful planet that is so rich in resources. The end of the Apollo program closed a golden chapter in the age of space exploration. But the book is still being written. Its meaning is still being shaped for the nation and for each person who watches the real-time continuation of America's achievements in space.
Are just something unbelievable, Lou. I've spoken to some people in the crowds, people who were here in 1927, 35 years ago, when they had that great parade for Colonel Lindbergh, and they tell me that it was nothing like this. They've got more people, more ticket tables.
A shower of glory for a new American hero.
Happen in this program, though we're not.
And after the last hurrah, a nation's right to know the full account.
We have 3 examples here to prove it.
Gonna roll that tape in this?
No, let's just stay right with it, Bobby. Stay with it.
He's recording.
All right, ready to go to Cronkite. Vic, you ready, Sam?
Stand by, Walter. Okay, you're on.
Weather good, astronaut in good shape, tracking systems around the world.
Tell Cronkite to back off. Let Powers take it from here on in.
Astronaut Gordon Cooper, the man that'll be at the controls of the spacecraft in the U.S. 6th attempt at manned spaceflight, was awakened this morning at 2:50 a.m.
What you're about to see is a demonstration in action of an open society and a free press. To the legion of men who photographed it, the story of Project Mercury was told in the realm of the frozen image. The story began in Washington at a press conference in 1959. It was a Jules Verne kind of a story that became a national goal, front page news, a focus for our scientific and creative energy. The Cape became one of the prized datelines in journalism.
Signifying the capsule number. On the concrete square itself, the pad of
downrange from the Cape, south of Bermuda, the recovery forces stood ready.
Which is one ingredient of the fuel. Most of the preliminary work has been done here by now. We await the arrival of astronaut Shepard.
Radio and television carried the event as it happened.
This is Freedom 7. The fuel is go 1.2 G. Cabin at 14 psi. Oxygen is go.
For depth and interpretation, there was the printed page. We had time to pause, to wonder at this new age. What would it bring? An astronaut and a president with a wonderfully warm and ready wit.
Therefore, I want to again express my congratulations to Alan Shepard. We're very proud of him, and I speak on behalf of the Vice President, who is chairman of our Space Council and who bears great responsibilities in this field, the members of the House and Senate Space Committee who are with us today, and this decoration, which is going from the ground up here.
Astronaut Gus Grissom was successfully launched today at 7:20 a.m.
The helicopter with the astronaut aboard, and we're seeing him in the cockpit. You'll hear it as it lands on the deck here. You'll hear the sound of its rotors and its engines on. He doesn't look very wet. He has his helmet on. His hands, the doctors are immediately treating him.
After welcome on deck, a personal message.
Really proud of you, and I must say you did a wonderful job.
Later, Grissom's report to the press.
You probably already heard, getting the capsule out of the water, he couldn't lift it. He ran into an engine problem, or at least what they think now is an engine problem, and couldn't lift it free. There were 3 helicopters there. I guess actually there were 4. I don't remember seeing 3. And I was sort of in the center of all 3 of them and couldn't get to any of them. Marine chopper pilot did get in close enough for me to get hold of the sling, and then everything was pretty good with me from then on. They picked me right on up and brought me onto the Randolph.
Di Cape Canaveral ini terdapat perasaan menunggu-nunggu.
The world prayed with the litany of the countdown.
30 seconds and holding. We have encountered some difficulty in
But John Glenn was not to orbit this day.
Guidance equipment for the Atlas launch vehicle. We are not able at this time to get a specific identification on what the problem is. We know simply that we do have some problems over there. This is Mercury Control.
Once more, the countdown is underway at Cape Canaveral. Even at this hour, clusters of people are stopping to check the latest reports.
And once more, the world waited.
We have just completed a status check in the Mercury Control Center. We've been advised that at this time, all systems are go.
Accompanied by Dr. Douglas and another Air Force doctor, they walked over to the van, which would take them out to pad 16.
At 4:25, he began crawling into his spacesuit.
Wynn says he is the last man to shake hands with the astronauts and to smile at the monkeys.
Now, around the world, all Mercury stations reported go.
Let's go now to Ed Williams at the press site.
Over 500 newsmen here on the scene today to cover this.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
Anyone, all their eyes were focused on the rocket. They were excited. They've been here many weeks waiting for this because of the delays, but when it came, it was exactly as everyone had planned. It was an exciting thing to watch, and this is the way they felt. And they're reporting that right now special equipment has been installed here at the press site for them to tell their story to the world, to their own newspapers, and for some radio stations from Latin America that are here.
He is reported to be a hale and hearty astronaut after having successfully flown the United States' first manned orbital flight. U.S. astronaut John Glenn is on the deck, is reported to be a hale and hearty astronaut after his history-making flight.
Sure, at the White House on this wet and chilly day in February, we haven't produced very hospitable weather for our hero, John Glenn, today. But the crowds are here. They've been waiting 2 hours now. The rain was much worse an hour ago when he arrived. There he is now on the North Portico, getting ready to ride to the Capitol with Vice President Johnson. That's the son, the daughter, Annie Glenn's in red. Vice President Johnson will ride with him.
Astronaut John Glenn has just turned the corner, heading down Pennsylvania Avenue here, and everywhere the crowd is still cheering. His bald head can be seen just coming into view. He's heading towards the big inverted V with the sign, "Welcome John H. Glenn Jr." Everywhere bedlam is breaking loose down here. People are waving practically everywhere. Signs, "John Glenn, America is proud of you. Welcome, John. Hi, John."
Today, I know that I seem to be standing alone on this great platform, just as I seem to be alone in the cockpit of the Friendship 7 spacecraft. But I'm not. There were with me then and with me now thousands of Americans and many hundreds of citizens of many countries around the world who contributed to this truly international undertaking voluntarily and in a spirit of cooperation and understanding. On behalf of all those people, I would like to express my and their heartfelt thanks for the honors you have bestowed upon us here today. We are all proud to have been privileged to be part of this effort, to represent our country as we have. As our knowledge of this universe in which we live increases, may God grant us the wisdom and guidance to use it wisely. Thank you, Colonel.
Loud and clear, Jose. Don't cry too much.
Okie doke.
Everything went well. And then a cliffhanger. The capsule overshot the expected landing area. Communication failed. For 35 minutes, there was no word.
Well, we've just received a happy word here aboard the USS Intrepid that one of the ship's own jet helicopters, HSS-2s that is, has just effected rescue of astronaut Scott Carpenter and is now proceeding toward the Intrepid.
After a post-flight examination, astronaut Scott Carpenter returns to the Cape, to his family, to the joys and cares of the earthbound. Even a daughter's skinned elbow.
Right now, the gantry is being pulled back from the bird, and the big silver Atlas rocket will be standing right in front of us, about 1 mile in front of our Mutual Canaveral Operations Center. The gantry is slowly moving away now.
Newsmen from all over the world have gathered here today to cover this, the 5th U.S. manned space flight, the 3rd orbital flight.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
Beautiful liftoff. Great. Eastern Standard Time. Astronaut Walter Schirra is now in his space capsule high above the Earth. The engines fired right on schedule. That bird took off just as beautifully as any flight you'd ever want to see.
Reports his fuel okay, his oxygen okay.
Within minutes, story and pictures were transmitted by the wire services. They appeared on page 1 of the daily newspapers of the world.
Loneliness in space. Wally Schirra might have some feelings along that line if he weren't so busy now in his Sigma 7 capsule. So right now he's powered down on the 4th orbit, that is drifting flight, out of communication with Earth.
One of the important tests of this particular 6-orbital flight will be the photographing of cloud covers and some of the land areas of the Earth.
I haven't even looked outside. The helicopters are now directly over the spacecraft. The one that is hovering is taking photographs. Practically can take them from this close. Commander Walter Schirra, the United States 5th astronaut, standing now in the window section and looking down, now looking at the top of his capsule.
This is the Mercury News Center, the contact point for newsmen. Staffed around the clock by NASA information officers.
They get just one?
They get one.
That's the Mercury News Center. The log transcript.
Here, questions are answered, interviews are arranged, news briefings, press conferences take place.
Astronaut Cooper, 22 orbit mission, will take him over more than 100 countries, islands, and possessions.
All right, we'll
In order to cover every phase of Project Mercury, the press, wire services, TV, and radio networks pooled their resources and personnel.
America's 6th man to venture into space, Gordon Cooper, has just left Hangar S. He's smiling at the crowd of technicians that has gathered. He looks extremely confident about today's flight.
This is Ed Williams at the press side. It's a beehive of activity this morning as the big gantry was just pulled back. The thousands of reporters, hundreds of reporters here on the press side are getting ready to report.
All systems are A-OK, and Gordo himself is reported as very up for the flight. To give you an idea of how Mercury Control looks at it, here's a report just received from them.
The press site, about 5,000 feet from the launch area. Here, newsmen, photographers, feature and technical writers are witness to success or possible failure.
Reporters and newsmen from all over the world. Approximately how many foreign countries are represented today? We have about 25 countries represented here, including the NATO group, which just came in this morning.
And as the last agonizing minutes of the countdown march by, television brings the nation to the scene and drops them right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Oh, all right, it's down. You got it down. All right. All right.
Hello, New York. Go ahead. Hi, Don. Just a minute, I'll ask him. Bob, how much longer do you want to hold on this?
Stay with it for another couple seconds, Davey.
Okay, we'll be with it another couple of seconds, then we'll take off.
It's T-minus 40 seconds now and counting. All systems go.
Videotape, come in. We want all of this. Hold on to it. We'll log it later. Stay with the pool. Here she goes. Right. Stand by, Walter. Here she goes. But it's not going to be long. Videotape. Keep going.
All right, and the tell-off is up, and the announcer's on, and we're on. All right, cue him, Sandy.
At this point, the capsule and the booster are on what's called automatic sequencing. This is Mercury Control. We have a momentary hold at T-minus 19 seconds. That's not an unexpected hold. It shall be picked up almost immediately. T-minus 15 seconds and counting. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2.
All right, there it goes.
Beautiful takeoff. He should be getting vibration now. And now the pitch over. This is Mercury Control. The trajectory looks very good at this time. The Atlas pitching from straight ascent to trajectory. 40 seconds into the flight. If he's going like earlier flights, the vibration's growing for Cooper now. He's just about reaching max Q. That's maximum vibration, maximum dynamic pressure. We are now 55 seconds into the flight. The trajectory looks okay at this time. At maximum dynamic Cooper pressure. Reports his oxygen supply, his fuel supply, and all onboard systems are go. Oh, it looks like a beautiful takeoff again from Canaveral.
Radio keeps us right with the story as Cooper races around our planet.
Presents the flight of Faith 7, the 22-orbit mission of astronaut Gordon Cooper.
What a view. Boy, oh boy.
And now the presses of the world roll the story. Newspapers, magazines report in depth. Millions would read and savor the news of this day. A free and open society in action.
Good morning, everyone. This is Charles Hughes, ABC New York, with the latest news.
By radio, we were with Cooper most of the night. And we awoke early to see how his night went. It was like a grand, continued story in 2 parts with 18 chapters.
I wonder if you'd relay to the Cape the situation I had happen and see what they think on it. Now, the action that I have taken is to turn off my 05G switch fuse and my emergency 05G switch fuse.
The atmosphere here in the Mercury Control Center is hushed, as everyone listens very carefully to make sure that the instructions get delivered and that astronaut Gordon Cooper understands them.
Now, a short while ago, Ken Klanick, flight manager for Project Mercury, and D. Brainerd Holmes, director of the NASA Space Agency, held a briefing for newsmen at Cape Canaveral. Moments ago, we learned of the first problem to develop in the flight. It came to light during the pass over Hawaii.
John Chancellor here, Mercury Control on the air. Let's go right away.
This time, that the inverters, which supply electrical power to his attitude control system, that is the automatic attitude control system, are both inoperative, both the primary and the alternate. And this means that he will have to perform the entire retro-rocket firing and re-entry operation on either fly-by-wire or on manual proportional control. Aboard the USS Kearsarge, estimate the parachute with Phase 7 hanging from it to be 3 to 4 miles away. The USS Kearsarge reports the spacecraft is on the water, as Kearsarge now estimates 700 yards from the spacecraft. 700 yards.
700 yards. I'll be damned.
The helicopters are circling. The swimmers, that is the underwater swimmers, are going into the water. They will have what we call the Stulken collar, that is that big yellow rubber ring around the base of the spacecraft.
And the news coverage continues as a man is reunited with his wife and daughters. And the 50th state shows its appreciation the way it knows how.
Kaplow again at Patrick Air Force Base, where the big Air Force jet carrying Gordon Cooper is slowing to a stop on the taxi ramp. The eyes straining to catch a glimpse of the astronaut who went 22 orbits. Hundreds of people gathered behind ropes, newsmen, photographers waiting for the moment when Gordon and his wife stepped down the ramp. Here they come. Major and Mrs. Gordon Cooper, followed by their daughters. Of the ramp by the Air Force commander and other dignitaries, all as people strain to catch these moments. The astronaut himself all smiles as he goes aboard the rear seat of a convertible for the inevitable ride and acclaim, in this instance, of the people of Cocoa Beach.
I think that those of you that know me know that I've always spoken honestly and straightforward to you. I intend to do so today. I'll run through the flight plan very briefly, factually, and when we get to questions, I will honestly try and answer any questions you have to ask. If I can't answer them, if I don't answer them, it's because I don't know the answer or we don't have the data yet to fully answer them. And they will be answered at a later date. But I was not real overly tired. I was warm from the re-entry and having been on the water for a short period of time. But I might add, not any warmer than I am right now. And I think at this point I'll lay it open to questions.
Describe this flight of yours as almost a routine ride. Were you at all impressed with this mission? And at any time, were you at all concerned for your personal safety?
Well, I waited quite a long while for this flight, and I was very impressed with it. I think anybody that goes up on a space flight and says they aren't impressed, there must be something wrong with them. I named my spacecraft Faith 7 for 3 reasons. 1, because of a belief in God and country. 2, because of a loyalty to organization, to the 2 organizations actually, which I belong. And 3, because of a confidence in the entire space team.
Deke, is it thought that one of these gentlemen sitting with you will be making the first Gemini flight, or do you think one of the original 7 will make the first Gemini flight?
There will be other launches and other press conferences. When they happen, they will be fully reported. Even now, the gantries of Gemini stand ready. When men once again ride an American spacecraft into orbit, at the mercy of God and thousands of technicians, the world once more will be there.
This is Saturn V, the rocket that will send 3 Americans toward the moon in Project Apollo. But this historic journey cannot be attempted without knowledge. Knowledge based on experience. For the United States, experience came by seeking answers to certain basic questions. Could a human being withstand an 8-day flight to the moon and back? Could a man control the movements of his spacecraft, rendezvous and dock with another vehicle orbiting the moon? Could he leave the protective cover of his spacecraft and perform useful work in space? Could he function effectively as an experimenter and use spaceflight to advance human knowledge? Could the Apollo spacecraft be guided and controlled during re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere so it could make precision landings any place on Earth? If the answer to any of these questions was no, it had to be known before 3 men travel 250,000 miles to the moon. And so in 1961, the Gemini program came into being as the necessary prelude to Apollo. This is the story of Gemini and its legacy to spaceflight. On Gemini, training began on Earth and in the atmosphere. This specially designed airplane was flown hundreds of times on parabolic sweeps into the sky to provide the Gemini astronauts with brief periods of weightlessness. Here, seconds at a time, the difficulties of living in space were rehearsed. Working under zero gravity, the Gemini astronauts gained experience with the equipment and techniques they would soon take into space. It took hours of training under these rigorous conditions to develop the confidence needed for operating in the space environment. The Gemini astronauts took their equipment underwater. Balanced between sinking and rising, they learned to pace themselves as they performed tasks in a condition that simulated longer periods of weightlessness. In the translation and docking simulator, they got the feel of maneuvering their spacecraft into position for docking with another vehicle. Gemini mission simulator, they flew entire missions without leaving the ground. Here, they learned to react quickly and correctly to problems fed to them through computers. The Gemini astronauts exposed themselves to the stresses of the space environment. They trained for emergencies, learning how to react if things did not go exactly according to plan. Parachute training, in case they were forced to eject from their spacecraft. Water survival for landings in the ocean. Survival in desert and jungle. But ultimately, there was no substitute for being there. Gemini took the men and the tools and the problems into orbit. In the 18 months between March 1965 and November 1966, 10 manned missions were launched from Cape Kennedy. 16 astronauts journeyed to their spacecraft on Launch Pad 19. Virgil Grissom and John Young were first. Then James McDivitt and Edward White. L. Gordon Cooper and Charles Conrad. Frank Borman and James Lovell. Walter Schirra, Thomas Stafford, Neil Armstrong, David Scott, Eugene Cernan and Michael Collins, Richard Gordon, Edwin Aldrin. 4 of the Gemini astronauts made the trip twice. Together, these men helped thrust the United States into a new era of exploration. Gemini was a single concept with a number of assignments. It was, in a sense, one launch, one flight, one recovery.
Stand by for 10-second countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff.
Space is infinite. It yields slowly to exploration. In their voyages into this environment, the Gemini astronauts logged more than 1,940 man-hours of flight. Hurtling through space at 5 miles a second, they circled the Earth 600 times. In their 40 Earth days in space, they witnessed, as few men have, hundreds of sunsets on the changing horizons of our planet. Sweeping over continents in a matter of minutes, they gained a new perspective of Earth. For Gemini, equipment and techniques were developed that enabled astronauts for the first time to maneuver their spacecraft, to change their orbit, to accelerate to new heights. The first Gemini maneuvers were basic, flying formation with the spent second stage of the Titan II rocket. Then a more difficult step, rendezvous, finding and approaching another craft in space.
Okay, Gemini 6, ready to copy. Okay, D8, 06, 3500. Pass at Hawaii, Rev 4.
The first target for rendezvous was another manned spacecraft. Gemini 6 approached within 1 foot of Gemini 7. Rendezvous, a major landmark in the history of manned flight. Aboard Gemini 7, astronaut Borman prepares to take motion pictures of Gemini 6 as the two spacecraft begin their station-keeping exercise.
And we have LOS also, both vehicles at Hawaii.
10 rendezvous were accomplished during the Gemini program. The techniques varied, for this maneuver is important to Project Apollo. The lunar module, on returning from the surface of the moon, must rendezvous and dock with the command and service module. In Gemini, conditions of lunar orbit were simulated in Earth orbit, and confidence for Apollo grew. On 4 of the Gemini missions, the rendezvous target was the Agena space vehicle. During the program, the Gemini astronauts located and docked with the Agenas 9 times, developing experience and confidence in this important maneuver. This experience is vital to the lunar mission, for the Apollo astronauts will dock twice on their journey from the Earth to the moon and back. As the spacecraft moved in, docking lights aboard the vehicle helped guide the pilot during the final stages of the maneuver.
Okay, Gemini 8, it looks good here from the ground. We're showing cone rigid. Everything looks good from the docking. Okay, we're going to cycle our stop arm switch now. Roger. With flight, we are docked.
But not everything always went according to plan. On Gemini 8, a thruster failed, causing excessive yaw and roll. Unable to find the source of trouble, Command Pilot Armstrong undocked. The roll rate accelerated, reaching an alarming 1 revolution per second. But Armstrong fought and won his struggle to regain control, and he brought Gemini 8 to a safe landing. On Gemini 9, when an Atlas rocket failed to place the Agena into orbit, a substitute docking target was launched. Trouble developed on the new target when its shroud failed to separate, leaving what the astronauts quickly named the Angry Alligator.
Gemini 9, Hawaii. How are you? I've got a weird-looking machine here.
Although the docking maneuver had to be canceled, the flight plan was revised so the astronauts could go on to practice rendezvous 2 more times, developing faith in their ability to cope with adversity and to learn from the unexpected.
The jaw is open at about 25 to 30 degrees, and both the piston springs look like they're fully extended.
On 2 missions, the Gemini astronauts actually assembled a new spacecraft in orbit, the combined Agena and Gemini. After docking, they commanded the Agena to restart its own rocket engine. On 1 mission, this space-built vehicle was flown to a record altitude of 851 miles. From their vantage point in space, the astronauts had a spectacular view of our planet. Although flight experience was the primary objective of Gemini, the program offered a unique space laboratory to science, medicine, and technology. More than 50 experiments were carried on the Gemini spacecraft. Many were repeated on several flights. One experiment was photography of the Earth. Vast areas never seen by man in their entirety were studied. More than 2,000 photographs were taken from space during the Gemini program. These pictures are being used to correct maps and to provide oceanographers, geologists, and geographers with new information about the Earth. Gemini astronauts also used their cameras to photograph cloud patterns and other atmospheric phenomena. This work supplemented information obtained from unmanned weather satellites. Hundreds of high-resolution photographs were made to provide new knowledge about the weather of the world. The astronomical sciences also benefited from Gemini, for the orbiting spacecraft enables scientists to send instruments far above the blanket of atmosphere, which filters and obscures a variety of phenomena. On Gemini 12, an eclipse of the sun was photographed for the first time from space. The results of scientific research conducted on Gemini have been made available to the world, not only helping to advance man's knowledge, but promoting a greater measure of understanding among nations. 3 of the manned Gemini missions were flown to investigate the problems of long-duration spaceflight. Gemini 4 was a 4-day mission. Gemini 5, 8 days. On Gemini 7, astronauts Lovell and Borman spent 2 weightless weeks in space. These flights confirmed the endurance of man and his new spacecraft systems. They showed that an astronaut can live in space longer than is required for a round trip to the moon, and thus paved the way for Project Apollo. Using the Gemini space vehicle, the astronauts also experimented with a new technique for holding their spacecraft's attitude fixed with respect to the Earth. Normally, this requires the continuous use of fuel.
Gina's just about horizontal with us right now, and what we're going to do is put in a very small thrust.
But on 2 missions, a Dacron tether was attached between the spacecraft and the Gemini.
The tether is nicely taut now, and I think as long as we keep it taut, we might be
The
able to...
Gemini, slightly nearer the Earth, was pulled more strongly by gravity than was the spacecraft. This small difference was enough to stabilize the vehicles so they could maintain their position without use of fuel. This technique has important implications for future space missions. Perhaps the most spectacular experiment of the Gemini program was extravehicular activity. Astronaut Ed White made the first American walk in space. Spurts of gas from White's handheld maneuvering device thrust him in the desired direction.
Are you ready for Capcom?
The floating object in the foreground is the astronaut's overglove, left behind in the spacecraft.
I've exhausted the fuel now, but I was able to maneuver myself outside of the spacecraft back. Maneuvered right up back on the back of the adapter. Just about Jim came back into his view. The only thing I wish is I had more. This is the greatest experience it's just tremendous.
In contrast to Ed White's successful 20-minute walk in space, the next three men to venture outside their spacecraft encountered unexpected difficulties. Although some useful work was accomplished, including on one mission, the historic retrieval of a scientific experiment left behind on an earlier flight, workloads were higher than anticipated. The astronauts had trouble stabilizing themselves outside the spacecraft. All three walks had to be terminated early.
Yeah, let me hang on to you. I got to rest here a minute, though. Okay. Well, how much tether you got up? Well, I'm hanging on to you right now. You want me to hang on to you?
The difficulties encountered on these missions posed profound problems for future space exploration.
I'm hanging on to you right now, tight. I don't have any help. Well, let's go get that tether. Let me have some tether out. Oh, okay. I'm ready to let you go.
So another more careful and more tightly controlled test was prepared for Gemini 12, the last flight in the program. Prior to this flight, astronaut Aldrin trained intensively underwater, pacing himself for his work in space. The tasks assigned to him were designed to compare the difficulty of working in a weightless environment with work under normal gravity. On Gemini 12, the problem of excess workload was overcome by frequent rest periods and the use of improved body positioning restraints, such as waist tethers, handholds, and foot restraints.
Good.
Extravehicular activity has important applications to the lunar mission. Apollo astronauts will leave their vehicle and install scientific equipment and collect samples on the surface of the moon. This requires experience working in pressure suits and performing tasks in the near vacuum of space. The success of EVA during Gemini will also give Apollo astronauts returning from the lunar surface the ability to board their command module, even if they are faced with docking difficulties.
I think maybe I'll move this tether out to the other ring. That looks a little better.
Gemini provided more than 12 hours of experience in extravehicular activity. The training, the caution, the slow accumulation of facts paid off. Man can work in space. On all Gemini missions, a major objective was to develop re-entry flight path and landing control, so the spacecraft could land at a specific place on Earth. This required the development of new techniques for guiding and controlling the re-entry of the spacecraft. This is the view from the spacecraft window as Gemini re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Glowing particles boiled off the protective heat shield to leave an incandescent wake. During Gemini, 10 manned spacecraft made this fiery re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Gemini 12 was the last. Its re-entry in November 1966 climaxed a program which will really have no end. For Gemini is illuminating the future. Of first importance is the fact that Gemini sent more men into space and kept them there longer. Gemini multiplied American manned spaceflight experience 37 times.
There it is. Hey. I see it. 12, Houston, we've got you on the boob tube. You look good.
Gemini, an open program, helped further promote international cooperation in space. People in other nations not only witnessed Gemini as it happened, but also helped accomplish the program's objectives, showing again the necessity for international cooperation in the peaceful exploration of space. Gemini also leaves as its legacy a greatly expanded science and technology, proof that government, industry, and the scientific community can work together to translate man's boldest dreams into action. Front ranks of the bearers of Gemini's legacy are the astronauts themselves. These veterans are now ready to face the challenge of Apollo. With its new questions, new problems, and longer, more difficult voyages. But after Gemini, one question no longer need be asked. Now, we know it can be done.
In the beginning, the void, the darkness, then light, then life. And from life came man, joining the caravan for the long, slow journey through a world of discovery, invention, exploration. His marks, his milestones, stretch out through the centuries. His footsteps echo down through the corridors of time. Time. July 1969 in Florida. The footsteps, the caravan quickened. the corridors shortened as man reached outside his world into another void. Today in Florida, they go about their lives, taking only a sideways glance at the reminders of that milestone. Reminders, images that vaguely jog our memory.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, aiming toward a planned liftoff time of 32 minutes past the hour, the start of our launch window on this, the mission to land men on the moon. The countdown still proceeding very satisfactorily at this time.
Time, it plays tricks on us. It smudges and blurs the sharp edges of reality. But we turn the trick and summon up our own reality, images, sounds, to help us remember.
During the powered flight. The batteries all look good. The next time we go internal will be at the 50-second mark with those batteries, and they will remain, of course, on internal power during the flight. The lunar module, which has been rather inactive during these latter phases of the count, also is going on internal power at this time on the 2 batteries in the ascent stage and the 4 batteries at the descent stage.
They came 1 million of them to this place, drawn by the magnet of history in the making.
The astronauts, the prime crew, were awakened at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight and proceeded to have a physical examination in which they were declared flight ready. They sat down for the normal astronaut fare on launch day. As far as breakfast is concerned, orange juice, steak, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. The target for the Apollo 11 astronauts, the moon, at liftoff will be at a distance of 218,096 miles away. The astronauts departed from their crew quarters after checking out their suits. They departed from the crew quarters at 6:27 a.m. and some 27 minutes later, 8 miles away from the crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center, atop the launch pad at Complex 39, 6:54 a.m., the commander, astronaut Neil Armstrong, was the first to board the spacecraft. He was followed about 5 minutes later by Mike Collins, and finally Buzz Aldrin, the man who's sitting in the middle seat during liftoff, was the 3rd astronaut to come aboard. The weather is certainly go. It's a beautiful morning for a launch to the moon. We expect a temperature of about 85 degrees in the Kennedy Space Center area. We're still go on Apollo 11 at this time. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Apollo 11. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. They and millions of others reached out and, in their own way, touched another planet. The images remind us that it happened, but not how it really was in the context of the times. George Lowe, one of the architects of the Apollo program, does remember.
If you think back at the period of the 60s, they weren't very happy years in general. We had, well, the ever-deepening involvement in Vietnam. We had riots on the campuses, riots in Watson elsewhere, 3 terrible assassinations. A great deal of strife and turmoil in the country. And yet all of this was overcome by one single event, and that was Apollo 11. The decade ended with it. It was a fantastic adventure that I believe helped overcome all of the bad things of the decade. It represented Americans to ourselves, and particularly to the rest of the world, as we like to see ourselves and as we hope the rest of the world likes to see us.
The equipment of Apollo, some of it is now in museums, artifacts from an age of discovery. These strange-looking objects, they're there as reminders that after all, it did happen, and it happened the way we remember. The facilities of Apollo, now silent and still. In Houston, Mission Control, the nerve center of manned flight operations. The chapters of space history, first Mercury, then Gemini, then Apollo, were written by the people who sat at these consoles. And these chapters of history came at us with breakneck speed. Christmas Eve, 1968, in the beginning, Apollo 8, the footsteps were quickening. A few months later, Apollo 9. The long years of preparation were contracting into days, hours, minutes. The first manned flight of the lunar module, the Spider. Apollo 10, the dress rehearsal for the real thing. In 5 months, 3 missions, and in the 7th month, the payoff. Then, the celebrations. The images and the sounds fade in our memories, but some things we can't forget. Names: Apollo 11, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. Other names: Grissom, White, and Chaffee. They remind us that it wasn't all success and celebration. There was failure and tragedy. Early in 1967, the 3 crawled into the command module at Cape Kennedy for a test. There was a flash fire. All 3 died. After the shock came the long, painful job of picking up the pieces, learning the lessons, coming together for a common goal. The remains of the launch structure stand as a reminder that the goal was reached. These strange shapes, what do they mean? These towers of steel, what are they? Monuments or leftovers from some earlier age of discovery? In the long history of man, in the slow journey of the caravan, what point do these mark? Historian Arthur Schlesinger: I have no doubt at all that if posterity remembers the 20th century for anything, Historians 500 years from now, looking at the 20th century, it will be because it will be the century when man first began to break his terrestrial bonds and began the exploration of space. So that's it? As man learned and moved on and discarded the earlier structures, he came to these. They're marked for further milestones, reserved for future missions, other reaches to other different voids. Historians 5 centuries from now will mark this century, this place, and they will further note that from the void, life, man, it took eons to reach this point. But once there, the centuries and years compressed into days, hours, split seconds of exploration. The wheel, the engine, the airplane, they came slowly at first, then with increasing velocity. And then this, so huge, so powerful, so different that no ordinary modern name would suffice. They reached backward through antiquity to Roman mythology, and they named it Saturn. Saturn. His father was heaven, his mother earth. Complex organization, the mammoth machines, the incredibly detailed technical knowledge, the dedication. It was all harnessed, sharpened to a fine edge, and focused. The program developed and matured. Apollo 17 was launched at night, and even the old hands, the hardened veterans of the space program, couldn't help but feel the awe and wonder and excitement. In the excitement of the split second of exploration, man doesn't stop to freeze the moment in history, to look at it and ask what it means. He simply lives it out. But in the Apollo program, on their way to the moon, they found a way to live out their strange moments in those strange spacecraft. It may be the peculiar nature of Americans to make history and to have fun in the making. They relaxed and had fun because we, were confident of success. But the program teaches lessons. Confidence is a transitory thing. Apollo 13.
Hey, Houston, we've had a problem here. Can you say again, please? Houston, we've had a problem. Stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
3 days out, barreling toward the moon, an explosion. No one would see the problem for some time, but they went to work on it. The people of Apollo coalesced into a single dedicated unit, linked themselves with their technology, and cheated tragedy. A new chapter in space history was written in Mission Control. Eugene Kranz was the flight director when the problem developed.
Throughout this entire next several days, there was one dominant thought in the minds of all of the flight controllers. We teach them that between God, country, and your own capability, that you can solve any problem that may occur in flight. Throughout the entire course of Apollo 13, there was never any doubt that we'd get the crew back. So there was a very positive approach, and with this kind of approach, you can solve just about any problem that comes up.
Solve any problem, country, capability, old-fashioned words during a time when some said the old-fashioned virtues were forgotten. Well, they weren't forgotten. They were translated into action, into programs which took man soaring above the surface of the moon, away from Earth, but always looking back on it. These divided thoughts, the moon, the Earth, run through the Apollo program a sort of theme. They went there flying in their graceful machines, but they always thought back to where they came from. Perhaps that's natural. The moon is a strange place for men to be flying to. If it's strange for men, for mankind, it's stranger still for the individual man. Harrison Schmitt, Dr. Harrison Schmitt, a geologist, he touched the moon and remembers how it was when Apollo 17 was making its descent, the last flight to the moon, the last time that man walked on its surface. Schmitt remembers how it was.
One's first feelings are a mixture, a very complex mixture of humility, of excitement because of something you had planned to do was being accomplished, but of a great attention to detail, to the detail that you had thought about and learned about for so many years prior to the actual event. That detail keeps you occupied with where your hands are and where your feet are, which rung they might be. You try to remember, well, am I at the bottom of the rung? And then as one moves away and tests his way on the surface of the moon and looks around, and in my case, looked around a very magnificent valley, you see a rolling, hilly country that is interspersed with some blocky fields of rocks that you know because you've studied the photographs, and you saw them as you descended surround large craters that have been formed in that rolling countryside. These rolling dark hills merge in the distance a few kilometers away with the very smooth but very bright colored slopes of the massifs. And they rise with a majesty to rocky tops that are almost beyond description because there's nothing like that we have seen on Earth.
The Sea of Tranquility, Hadley Rill, Taurus Littoral. They were once strange names on the map of the moon, but the men of Apollo gave reality to the names by being there and showing us the places. They explored 60 miles of its surface, and their travels took them to craters, foothills, to explore, to observe, and to sample. The hard rock proof of Apollo, enshrined in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., 478.8 grams of microbreccia, under glass for mere earthlings to see and whisper about. Other rocks from the moon, 840 pounds, are being studied and talked about by scientists in laboratories around the world. Not only rocks, tens of thousands of photographs of those strange, exotic features of the moon. And telemetry, data on tape, facts, figures. The studies will go on for years, and the answers will come slowly, answers to questions about the moon and the solar system. The science of Apollo is not merely concerned with samples from past milestones, yesterday's missions. In a special room in Houston, men sit at consoles and command instruments on the moon to send them today's data. Then they receive it today within 8 seconds of the command. Science, that's the key, and technology, and something else. In the drama of the moment, few stop to think of the essential element, the one thing that made it happen. People came to this program, government people, university people, contractor people. They brought to Apollo skills and knowledge and determination. This source of human intellectual energy was marshaled, focused, challenged. What came out of the effort was not just a very successful program, but a rich national resource of vast proportions. Crystals from the moon, the symbols of the science of Apollo. Behind it, causing it, was the spirit of Apollo.
I was strolling on the moon one day in the merry month of December. No, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. When, much to my surprise, a pair of bunny eyes. That's the truth. You do that in West Texas and you get a...
We saw something of this spirit. We shared in the adventure, the excitement, the euphoria of being there. We shared it with the men who bounced across the surface of the moon.
Look at the size of that biggie. It is a biggie, isn't it?
And the surprise of discovery. We were there too, all of us, watching, vicarious explorers.
For the big boulder. Okay, we're headed that way. You get the tongs, John? Yep, we got. I'll carry the rake. Look at the size of that rock. Can't believe it. Got it. I can't either. Okay, let's go on back. I am.
And the meaning, the significance of an occasion. That too came to us, flashed into our living rooms on our 19-inch window on the universe.
Throughout the world. We hope that this will be a symbol of what our feelings are, what the feelings of the Apollo program are, and a symbol of mankind that we can live in peace and harmony in the future.
There was also pride. They put up the flag and then posed for pictures, as any visitor to a foreign place might do. The flag of each mission stood there as a reminder that we had been there, but there was the realization that in truth, it belonged to all the people. There are no boundaries on the moon. The focus was the moon. That's what it was all about. But by reaching up there, we, in a sense, came back here.
As one stands and scans a 360-degree panorama of his own, one of the first objects in the dark lunar sky that you see is a bright and beautiful bluish globe that we call Earth. This globe represented to all of us, I think, not only home, but a very fragile place that we have come back and felt that needed not only protection, but understanding.
They first went there in 1969. They last left there in late 1972. Between the beginning and the conclusion, they came to feel, to dimly perceive what it was all about, to come to a perspective on the meaning of it all. Poet Archibald MacLeish has said it better than most. To see the earth as it truly is, small and blue and beautiful, in that eternal silence where it floats, is to see ourselves as riders on the earth together, brothers who know now they are truly brothers. The excitement of the mission, the tension and drama of the splashdown, they remain only in our memories, and in time they'll be replaced in the future by other missions, other memories. The moments of Apollo may be over, but the understanding and the discovery, they go on. And the full meaning, the real meaning, may yet be in the future too. But for now, for the present, the images and the sounds provide meaning enough to each in his own way and to each in his own time.